Hi everyone, it's Teresa Green with Slow Paths Wellness, and today I'm wrapping up my video series on February as National Cancer Prevention Month, and as I've said in previous videos, as both a holistic health practitioner and as a cancer survivor myself, a month dedicated to preventing cancer is a really big deal to me. So in the past couple of videos, I've done some reviews of the book Anti-Cancer Living, which I found extremely helpful in my own cancer journey, and I highly recommend it to anyone both wanting to prevent a cancer diagnosis and for people going through a cancer diagnosis or on the aftermath of a cancer diagnosis and after treatment to try to prevent recurrence and to have a more fulfilling life after you've gone through a cancer journey. So I wanted today to continue that conversation with a different book and talk a little bit about my own experience, both as a cancer survivor and as a holistic health practitioner who sometimes does help people when they're dealing with cancer as an adjunct to their other treatment plans. So first, I guess my quick story here. In 2020, I was diagnosed with endometrial cancer, also called uterine cancer. It was stage 3. Basically, what had happened in my case is the cancer had spread to just about every organ that I didn't have to either survive or not have a very inconvenient life. So when they had my surgery, basically the uterus, the fallopian tubes, the ovaries, the cervix, they all came out. I had chemotherapy, came out the other side of that. There was no sign of any further cancer, and so I am just going through the process of being checked out first every 3 months. Now I'm at every 6 months, and in another year and a half I'll be checked every year, and then I'll be considered to be in remission. The tricky thing with uterine endometrial cancer is it does have a fairly high recurrence rate, and so in my own life I am using lifestyle factors to do everything I can to reduce my risk of a recurrence. And that's in my practice when people come to me, whether they're wanting to prevent cancer if they have a family history, or if they're wanting to have help as they go through cancer to avoid side effects, or if they're past cancer and they just don't want to, they want to take as many, they want to limit their risk as much as possible for a recurrence. I use basically the same strategies, and that's one of the things I'm going to talk about today in another book that I'm going to talk about some. So my own experience as far as on the treatment side of helping people who are going through cancer treatment, in my East Asian Chinese medicine training, we had training on being an adjunct, on using herbs, using acupuncture, using different breathing practices and meditation practices to help people as they go through cancer treatment, whether that's conventional medicine treatment or more of an alternative treatment. I'm also trained in functional medicine coaching, which, like Chinese medicine, East Asian medicine, is about balancing your body's systems, finding out what your body needs, and then trying to help provide that first through lifestyle factors, through food factors, and then through supplements. Of course, if you're in the middle of cancer treatment and you're wanting to do supplements, you have to be extra careful, because some of the supplements that in day-to-day life without a cancer diagnosis are very beneficial to you can actually be dangerous and can actually, there's some studies indicating at least that they can feed some cancer. So you need someone who really has a background in that, who has really looked into it to know what they're doing, or who has the resources to look, because this information changes constantly. So what somebody knew last week could have changed. So you need someone who's on top of the newest research, who's reading and listening and learning all of the new things, just like your oncologist should do. My oncologist, when we talk, he's always able to say, I just saw a study that said this, or these studies have said this for a long time, now we're kind of leaning this way. He keeps on top of the literature. He knows what's going on. And if you have someone that is treating you while you're in cancer treatment or after your treatment, and you have a cancer history now, you have a history as a cancer survivor, you want someone who has that information. A really good example of that is soy products. When I started school, while a lot of us in the East Asian or just herbalist in general realm felt like phytoestrogens, it didn't make sense that they prevented cancer, but people's oncologists told them not to have them because they had an estrogenic effect. That didn't seem right to us, but the standard prevailing wisdom was avoid, especially soy, avoid phytoestrogens like dongui because they can have an effect on your cancer. Well, now it's pretty well established, pretty well accepted that it's actually the opposite. That soy, even during breast cancer treatment, is not a problem. It's actually the reverse, that the phytoestrogens are a much friendlier form of estrogen for your body to process. And since we are all exposed to xenoestrogens in the form of plastics and different chemicals that are polluting the air and polluting the water and polluting our food, having those phytoestrogens, whether they're in the form of soy, most botanical plants, most plants have some estrogenic effects, except for cruciferous vegetables, which tend to actually help your body to process those estrogens better and reduce that level. They are, when you have plenty of those in your system, and then your body is exposed to these endocrine disrupting chemicals that bind to estrogen receptors, if you have plenty of the phytoestrogens, the estrogen-like substances that are plant-based, they beat those bad chemicals, to make it a little simpler, to the punch, and it's actually much safer for you. So that's an example of how having knowledge from 10 years ago, 15 years ago, could be very dangerous for you, because now most people who are in the fields of oncology who are knowledgeable about herbal medicine, about food, lifestyle factors, they actually encourage the use of soy and encourage the use of phytoestrogens as something to increase your chances of survival, whereas in the past they discouraged it and thought that it was very dangerous. So again, if you're going through any form of cancer treatment, if you have a cancer history, or if you even have a family history that's very strong, or you're very concerned about it, make sure the people that are on your team for helping you with your health care have knowledge and are continuing to learn, because as I said, knowledge that seemed very certain just a few years ago is already changing. Epigenetics is another example of that. We used to say, oh, if you have a genetic history of cancer, well, sad for you, that's bad. Now we know that for the numbers I've seen around is that for the most part, familial histories, genetic predispositions for cancer, or for most other diseases, it's about 15% of your risk factors, which means you have 85% of your risk factors that you can control yourself, or at least a portion of those. No one can control 100% of anything. But that by making good lifestyle choices, you can greatly diminish your risk, so that 15% of family history is actually much less of an issue, maybe even less of an issue than someone who isn't making the same diet or stress management or exercise choices that are very good for reducing the dangers of cancer. So that's kind of a broad way of saying something, but that's my background in cancer treatment, even before I was diagnosed, and of course after I've been diagnosed, I've been greatly increased my reading and studying for it. So if you are dealing with a desire to prevent cancer, a current cancer treatment situation, or a cancer survivorship, and wanting to increase your health and help yourself through either side effects of chemo or radiation or other treatment or surgery, or just making sure you're reducing your risk of recurrence, I would be happy to talk to you about that, and we can talk about the role that natural health, alternative health has in that space, and what we could do together to help make your life a better life as you are a cancer survivor. Now, the other thing I'm going to do today in this video is review another book, just as I did with Anti-Cancer Living, but I'm going to interweave my own experiences in that a little bit, because I think it's very important for people who are considering what cancer is like and wanting to prevent it. It's important to see people who have survived it, because too often, even in TV, it's so annoying to watch TV, and as soon as they want to kill somebody off, but they want it to take a little while, they just give them cancer. You die when you have cancer. And that's so not true anymore. I mean, it was never 100% true, but it's even less true now. There are lots of us walking around who've had a severe cancer diagnosis, stage 3 is pretty severe, and are walking around the other side showing as I'm at what they call no evidence of disease, or in remission, and live decades to a completely normal or even beyond normal lifespan after going through a cancer diagnosis. And I think it's really important to know that, because even on a prevention standpoint, I don't think you should be so terrified of getting cancer that you let it rule your life. If you have seen family members who have had a cancer experience and you're very afraid of that, I think it's good to know, because the stress of constant fear is actually going to increase your risk of developing cancer. So it's important to know that if you have a cancer diagnosis, there are things you can do. No one's guaranteed a cure of cancer. From the stage 1 to stage 4, no one is completely guaranteed that they will never have cancer progress, that they will never be looking at death in the face of cancer. We can't say that. No one can say that. But we can say that there are a lot of things you can do. There are a lot of things that you can do to make your journey, whether it's long or short, with cancer, more pleasant and more fulfilling and more meaningful. And that doing those things actually can also increase your odds, increase your survivorship rates of coming out of the other side of it and being able to be a cancer survivor that, if you want to, can share your story and help other people have hope and have a realistic hope. So the book that we're going to review today is called Radical Remission. It's one I found extremely helpful when I was first diagnosed, as soon as I got my hands on it. It's called The 9 Key Factors That Can Make a Real Difference. It's also subtitled Surviving Cancer Against All Odds. And the author is Mary Ann W. I believe it's Cirone, Cirone. And I really like her book. The name is a little misleading. I really like her book because it is not the secret things that you need to know to keep from getting cancer. It's not a supplement, or it's not, go off into another country back in the woods and find this, little hermit living there and he'll cure you of your cancer or something like that. It's nothing like that. She went through and she researched people who had had an unexpectedly positive outcome after a cancer diagnosis. Some of them later on did go on to die from the cancer that they had been diagnosed with, but it was well outside of the lifespan predictions that their doctors and researchers who dealt with that kind of cancer had for them. And so she took those factors, she boiled them down into 9 different factors, and she talks about them. And those 9 factors have a statistical, I guess that's not quite the right word. These are the factors that people who live longer than people expect to with cancer, or come out completely out the other side of it, regardless of their treatment. These are things that they do across the board. This is something that is way beyond average that this comes up with. And I'm looking at this, and yes, I ended up developing all of these. I didn't have all of these when I first started, but I developed them. So I'm going to go over the 9. I'll talk a little bit about my own experiences, a little bit about some of the things I've read, and as I'm reviewing this book. But as I said, it's not talking about the miracle cure of cancer. It's talking about things you have control over in your life that you can do that increases your chances both of having a radical remission, or a better outcome than anyone would ever have expected. It also just makes your life better. So even if you don't have cancer, don't have a family history, or not really all that worried one way or not about getting it, it's a good book to read, because if you're doing these things, you're not only reducing your risk for cancer, and this is something I've said in the other videos during the Cancer Prevention Month, you're also just giving yourself better overall health. So you're reducing your risk of heart disease, of diabetes, of dementia, of even allergy symptoms, even some autoimmune symptoms they've seen have changed based on some of the changes they have here in this book and some of the others I've talked about. So here are her, let's see what she called, 9 key factors. The first one is radically changing your diet. And that then doesn't necessarily say, it doesn't say in the book, this is the diet to radically change to, because for different people, it's different. And for different cancers, it's different. And I've seen studies where they talk about the keto diet being a wonderful treatment for cancer. I've seen studies talking about extremely low fat, low salt, plant-based diet making a huge difference in terms of preventing and or treating, helping in the process of treating cancer. Let me make sure put that back into the keto diet too. There's treating cancer with, well, really anything, even chemo and radiation is kind of one of those things. It's all, there's a big picture, and you have to have lots of different factors looked at in order to get the best treatment possible. So, keto and low-fat plant-based are very different diets, but yet there are studies showing that both of them are diets that people have used, and they attribute some of their cancer healing to those diets. So it's not necessarily about which diet. It's about looking at your particular circumstances, your particular life. If you have cancer, your particular cancer, or if you have a family history, the cancer that you have a particular family history for, and correlating the information. And some of that you will have to do yourself. It's because everybody's unique, and you need to, even if you have an expert coming to tell you about a specific diet, it's important for you to look at all the at more of the information. No one can look at all of it, because The guy that's the very, completely vegan, plants-based guy has a bias. The guy that's completely keto has a bias. The one who is the macrobiotic person has a bias. And it might be a bias you agree with, but you need to take the time to see that for yourself. So as far as radically changing your diet, even though I thought I ate pretty healthy before my cancer diagnosis, I did radically change my diet. I used to eat a fair amount of saturated fat. It was in the form of grass-fed, pasture-raised, homegrown meat that was as healthy as meat can be. But I've switched to almost all plants-based, not 100%, but probably at least 85%, moving into 90% plants-based. I've dropped my saturated fat. Now I mostly use olive oil if I use oil at all, whereas I used to use butter. Again, grass-fed, very healthy butter. But now when I try to have the butter, my body's gotten used to unsaturated fat, and it just feels so rich and unctuous. It's not even pleasant anymore beyond maybe like one little bite. But so I don't do that anymore. I've cut processed sugar out of my diet. I used to be someone that when I wanted a treat, I'd go get a cupcake. Now when I want a treat, I go get some blueberries, or I go get a mango or something like that. And that also has made a really big difference in how I feel day to day. So it's not just about my cancer prevention strategy now. It's about I enjoy my life more with this, because I don't have the same ups and downs in energy. I don't have the same mood swings. I don't have the same hypoglycemia. I don't get hungry, like that desperate, horrible hunger where you feel like you would eat anything someone put in front of you when you've missed your meal by a few hours. I don't really get that so much anymore. And that comes from some of the changes I've made. I'm much, much more careful. I was careful before, but I'm much more careful about whole foods as pure as possible. So organics means more to me than it used to, even though it meant a lot to me before. Pure water, I traded out my plastic water bottles. I have a stainless steel water bottle now, and to avoid getting the xenoestrogens that leak out of plastics into water. So I've done the drastically changing my diet, and I also recommend that as part of treatment for just about anybody who comes into the office if they aren't already making those changes towards whole foods, whether you have meat in your diet or not, whether you have nightshades. I don't eat nightshades anymore, which I don't necessarily think is necessary for everyone. For me, it's been very helpful. And nightshades are tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, and eggplant. And I occasionally, when I'm really wanting to have real Thai food and not my little kind of wimpy version of it, I will go on ahead and have some peppers. But that's like maybe a couple times a year is all I do. So radically changing your diet. Again, one of the other things that in the Anti-Cancer Living book he mentioned is he was at a conference, and when they all sat down, all the different people with all their different diets that they talked about at length on their presentations, when they all sat down together, the plates were probably at least 75% the same. One might not have had rice because they were low carb or keto. One might have had some meat because they were paleo or something like that. One may have had more cruciferous vegetables because that was the kale, the cruciferous vegetable people were over there. But basically they had a lot of vegetables. If they had any grains at all, some whole grains, and small portions of meat. So basically the Mediterranean style diet, or something within that Venn diagram, is what most people recommend. If you want to make it a little more restrictive because of things you've read that resonate with you, that's great. If you want to make it a little less restrictive because for you that feels like punishment to not be able to have a little bit of sugar here and there, then you get into the 80-20 rule, where you make sure the majority of your food is for health, and if 20% of it is for fun, your body should be able to handle that in most cases. Now sometimes there is a very serious illness, and cancer is one of those serious illnesses, where it's more important to be a little bit more strict within the confines, especially of no processed food. But in general, if you're just going for prevention, find the version of sort of loosely a whole foods diet where the food is as close to the way it came out of the ground or was born as possible, and eat that. Now, taking control of your health. This was a really big one for me, and is for a lot of people. A lot of us think of the people in the white coats as the important people, even if we don't consciously think that, even if we think it in a way that almost makes us rebel against it. We tend to take the word of people who are doctors or even licensed acupuncturists like myself over our own judgment. And on one hand, that makes sense. People who have trained for years in what they're doing, you should respect that training and respect that information. On the other hand, we are all unique and we're all individuals. And as I said about the diets, each person coming into a healthcare practice who is a healthcare practitioner has their own bias. My bias is as much as possible against surgery, against medications, and against foods that aren't whole foods. But I'm really open about that. And in spite of that bias, I have frequently recommended to people that they go to a specialist who will give them a medication or who will recommend a surgery, because within the realm of being biased against those things, unless absolutely necessary, the unless absolutely necessary part is very important. I've also seen people who have had doctors who have had their bias be so completely against anything natural or alternative that even things that are considered almost mainstream, like the soy I was talking about earlier, they still are unwilling to even consider it. Some practitioners stopped learning when they got whatever their degree or certificate was, and if you try to explain something to them that's new information, they just won't hear it. They just, it's over their head. They don't get that reference at all. And so taking charge of your healthcare is very important. I remember when I was in the hospital, I had part of the surgery, they wanted me to start getting out of bed on my own. Well, the problem is they didn't want me to do that without a nurse there. And the nurses it was in 2020 during COVID, the nurses were overstretched. And so they wanted to unhook me from some of the things that made it easier for me to not get out of bed. And just kind of leave me on my own. And I told them I'm not going to do that yet. And I said my physical therapist recommended that we not do that yet because of the risk of falling. And the nurse said, well, your physical therapist doesn't dictate your care, meaning, the doctor that they thought was going to say what they wanted to have happen was going to dictate my care. And I was very proud of myself. My answer was, I know that. I am the one that dictates my care. I am the one that gets to decide what happens to my body and myself. And that was a real important moment for me, because I said out loud something that I didn't even necessarily know that I thought. So taking control of your health is a really important idea, and that's in your healthcare, interacting with other healthcare professionals. It's also just in your day-to-day health to look at something and say, my health is important enough that I'm going to make room for that 30 minutes of exercise, or for fun a couple hours a week, or whatever it is that you need in order to be truly healthy. Take control of that. Make that your job, because if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to be able to take proper care of anyone else either. So that was step 2, is taking control of your health. Step 3 is following your intuition, and that's not in some touchy-feely, woozy way, woo-woo way. What that means is intuition. I think it was in Sherlock, the BBC Sherlock, that they talked about intuition. Intuition is where your brain, in the background, in the basement, is putting together all the facts you've been exposed to and putting them together in a way that you might not be able to explain, but it's still stuff that you learned. It's still things that are you took time to learn, and it went into the memory bank, and your brain put it together in a certain pattern. So intuition can be very helpful that way. If you're sitting and something just does not sound right to you, then give that some space. Give yourself time to think that through. Figure out what's going on. Is the thing that doesn't sound right, or the thing that sounds so perfect, does it sound that way because of some internal fear or internal negative message? Like the idea that when people hear about cancer, that they think, oh, I'm going to die, and that I just have an intuition I'm going to die. That's not an intuition. That's a limiting belief. But so, analyze your intuition. You don't want to just jump at everything that seems like a deeply felt thing and think that's intuition. But when you feel that, instead of just discounting it, analyze it. And then see, okay, for me, like I said, the idea of eating natural foods, of finding out the cause for something, that intuitively feels right. Even before people were writing books about it that you could get all the time everywhere. That just made more sense to me than, let's cut out the offending part and then just pretend like it never happened, which is kind of the advice that I sort of got during my cancer journey. Now that doesn't make sense to me. My body has gone through a big change. I'm a different person. I need to honor that in some way. So following your intuition in a very present, very thoughtful way will give you the benefit of all the years you've spent collecting information and hearing information that your brain has put together in its own unique way, and often can give you insights that you wouldn't have had otherwise. The next one, using herbs and supplements. Now this one be careful with, because if you don't know anything about herbs and supplements, using them can be dangerous. That said, there is an awful lot of information about some basic things that you can go out and read, and you can get, and you can talk to experts like me. I'm a master herbalist. I've spent time in school doing clinical herbal training where I actually was treating people in an herbal setting, being taught by people who had treated people with herbs in hospital settings in Asia. There are functional medicine practitioners like myself also, and they have studied supplements. They have studied which ones do what from where, and they've spent years putting that information together. You're a doctor, you're an oncologist. A lot of times oncologists, especially the oncology, the nurses that work with the patients on a little bit more than the doctors themselves may, they have had experience. They know, for example, that chamomile tea can be very soothing if your digestive system is upset. They have seen that experience on multiple people, and they're able to help you make those choices. So get some information. Don't just try to, just don't try to take something that you haven't done any research on at all. And if you see something on Dr. Google and it says this is generally considered safe, get a couple different places to tell you that before you just jump in and do it, because there are things that may generally be safe, but not for somebody going through chemo, not for somebody who has just had surgery, not for somebody who has a specific cancer risk. And if you're going through chemo, especially, anything you take, make sure you clear it with your doctor or the nurse in charge of your chemotherapy, because things that are completely benign in any other setting can be quite dangerous mixed with chemotherapy drugs. And there's time limits. There's certain amounts of time you should wait before you take some substances and things like that. And if they don't know, they will at least be able to tell you that, and then give you advice on whether this is something, well, we don't know, we don't think it'll hurt, let's do it anyway, or we don't know, let's be extra careful and not do it anyway. So, but taking herbs and supplements is something that most people, again, in this book, these are the people who had unexpectedly good outcomes when they were diagnosed with cancer. And across the board, they did something like that, whether that was taking, bottles and bottles and bottles of supplements, or drinking a cup of herbal tea every now and then. So it can be helpful if you are on a cancer journey to be able to at least look at that, because there are a lot of these things that can work as well as medications, especially when you're dealing with side effects of either cancer treatment or just giving your immune system that extra support so that it's able to fight off the effects of conventional treatment or fight off the cancer cells themselves. Releasing suppressed emotions. This one was extremely important for me. And we now know, there's enough research, there's enough studies out there that we know that if you are someone who's just kind of in a state of pent up either rage or depression or sadness or terror or anything like that, you have increased your cancer risk. Your body makes different chemicals in the face of these negative's not the right word, these unpleasant emotions that have not been expressed and not been handled well. And those chemicals predispose you to having more cells not operate properly, which will increase your risk of cancer. So releasing suppressed emotions is something that a lot of people did after their diagnosis. And in my case, I think, and probably a lot of the other people's cases in the books, part of that was just a matter of, I got the cancer diagnosis, and like everyone else, my first thought is I'm going to die. And so I thought, I don't want to live the rest of my life feeling just, kind of pushing down stuff and resentment or whatever. And so I already had a therapist, but I started with my therapist more. I started reading books about personal development, emotional development. I had been doing that already, but I took it up a notch, as they say. And I decided that, I'm going to enjoy my life. I'm going to take time to see the little things out there that are beautiful and touching and pleasant, and I'm going to enjoy that. I'm not going to say, I'm too busy to, look at birds or whatever. I'm going to take a extra, 3 minutes or whatever, 30 seconds in some cases to, notice how wonderful an avocado's texture is and what it feels like when you touch silk and all the different just tactile things that a lot of times we dismiss because we're so up in our head. And releasing suppressed emotions, that's part of that, because when you're more mindful, then those emotions can come out. Now, a lot of people who are dealing with suppressed emotions are dealing with them because they have a history of trauma. They've been abused, or they've been really badly hurt, or they've been in some kind of very terribly violent or very traumatic conflict. And for people like that, especially, those emotions can be overwhelming when you first start feeling them. Now, I'm a coach. As a coach, I have tools to help you deal with the practical aspects of managing that. Like we have mindfulness things we can do. We have breathing things we can do. We have, like, sometimes for anxiety, taking a walk can help because it moves that energy around some. But if you're having a truly traumatic thing where you're just really feeling like you're overwhelmed by these emotions, then you need a therapist, someone who is specialized in trauma therapy, someone who can help you. There are techniques, things like a different mindfulness. There's talk therapies. There's EMDR, which helps sort of get back into your subconscious and help your body pull specific memories or emotional memories and process them properly. Because with things like PTSD, which is where a lot of suppressed emotions can kind of be in that space. It's sort of something where you feel an emotion and you feel it more strongly than you normally would because it's connected to an event in your past that your brain didn't process properly. It's kind of like it kept that emotion stuck in the part of your brain that deals with the here and now. And it's like your brain never completely gets the idea that that happened in the past. And so it's almost like you're re-experiencing it when you have something that triggers that. So in that case, you want to have a therapist. You want to have someone who's a little bit beyond what coaching does, because coaching is helping you have your day-to-day life be better. Therapists are for people who are for helping you deal with the things in your past or the things that are so limiting to you that they actually interfere with your day-to-day life. Now, the next one's increasing positive emotions. And this is a wonderful one because it's fun in addition to being extremely helpful. They've noted better telomere length, which is a sign of longevity. It's the telomeres are the little things on our DNA strands, and when they are longer, they're able to help DNA replicate better. And so your genetics they express themselves towards more healthy things when you have long telomeres, because long telomeres are reflective of other things in your lifestyle that are going well. So you're making better chemicals. And when you're making when you're increasing your positive emotions, when you are consciously, and some of us are fortunate enough it's unconscious, but when you are consciously reframing things, trying to see the positive in it, then that helps you make chemicals that are better at fighting cancer, better at protecting you from all of the illnesses the chronic illnesses that plague people. Now, increasing positive emotions does not mean toxic positivity. It does not mean denying negative emotions. That's why the one just before it is releasing suppressed emotions. Increasing positive emotions, a lot of that is just reframing. So you can go into something like, if you make a mistake, you can choose to go in it and go, oh, wow, I made a mistake. I'm such a loser. Boy, I don't even know if I deserve to be here because I made a stupid mistake. Even if it's a big mistake, if that makes it easier to have those kind of negative feelings about it. But even if it's a big mistake, you could, instead of seeing it that way, you could see it as, wow, I made a really big mistake. This has consequences. This has repercussions. But I learned something from that mistake. And now I'm able to change what I'm doing. I'm able to make a different choice, and I can take this mistake and I can learn from it, and I can help myself with what I've learned from it, and I may even be able to help other people with what I've learned from it. If I've learned I made a big mistake and it's changed my life in a way I didn't like, and I turned it around, when someone else makes that same mistake, I have something to offer them. And so for me, as far as the increasing positive emotions, I talked about making sure I found that I enjoyed things in life. And I also started reading, Rick Hansen is a therapist that talks a lot about this. I started reading the idea of self-compassion, which doesn't mean, I talked to someone one time about this and they said it made them uncomfortable because it felt like it got them off the hook when they did something bad. And that's not what it is at all. What it is taking personal responsibility, being very realistic about things, and at the end of the day, seeing that you are a human being, and as a human being, you have a right to make mistakes because you're imperfect. We're all imperfect. And it's what you do with those mistakes that gives you a sense of self-confidence, a sense of purpose, and a sense of helping. So when you make a mistake, choosing to increase your positive emotions can mean saying, okay, I made a mistake. That was very bad. If it's something that has hurt someone else, you may need to do something to try to mitigate that hurt if you're able to, if there's some way you possibly can. But you can stand tall and say, okay, I'm a person, I'm an adult, I'm a responsible human being who made a mistake and is moving beyond that mistake now. And you don't have to do that just with mistakes. You can do it with anything. You can look in something, you can be in the this is what you choose to look at. So you can be in the checkout line and you can see all of the people there, and you can choose to look at the happy babies instead of being mad about how long the line is, or seeing how, somebody over there looks cranky and you're thinking, boy, I don't want to be around them. You can choose to look at the more positive part of something. So that's the increasing positive emotions. Now, number 7 is embracing social support. And this is one I had a challenge with. I was an introvert. I am an introvert. I was also bullied when I was younger, so I tended to not trust people very much. But embracing social support is an important part of especially cancer treatment. There are lots and lots and lots of information out there that say that the people who have the strongest social network, the strongest sense of social connection, are the ones who have the best outcomes when it comes to cancer treatment, cancer survivorship. And ways you can do that are, one, learn how to learn proper boundaries, learn healthy boundaries, because a lot of the times when social support is not fun, it's because you're letting people walk all over you, or you're walking all over people. There's a book called Boundaries by Henry Cloud and John Townsend that is very, very good for people wanting to build boundaries. There's a book called Set Boundaries, Find Peace by Nidra Tawwab, and it's another very, very good book on learning what boundaries are, what they feel like, how you manage that in your life. There's also a podcast called Emotionally Healthy Woman by what's her first name? I can't remember her first name, but her name is Scazzaro is her last name, and she it's going to come to me, and I'm going to yell it out a minute, but anyway, Mrs. Scazzaro, and she talks about boundaries, and she has some very concrete ideas about how to state your preferences and how to recognize that someone else has a right, for example, to be disappointed in your choice, but you still have the right to make that choice. So that's embracing social support. Once you have the boundaries, it becomes so much easier to enjoy social support with other people, because you don't have that feeling like you have to kind of protect yourself from somebody else. So embracing social support, I believe that boundaries are a big part of that. And then also, again, that goes back to the releasing suppressed emotions and just dealing with things that may have happened in your past, beliefs that may have gotten stuck in there by either, sometimes well-meaning parents or adult figures in your life, or your interactions with other people, other peers. Like I said, I was bullied, so I kind of started looking for how people could hurt me a lot in my life. And as I worked on myself, worked on my suppressed emotions, worked on having more positive emotions, worked on having healthy boundaries, I started realizing that instead I can look at how can this interaction go well if I felt strong enough to deal with it if it did not go well. So embracing social support is very important, and I think that you almost have to have a subheading on that one of having healthy boundaries. Now, deepening your spiritual connection. And in the book, she talked about how that meant a lot of different things to different people. One thing they do say, almost everyone I've ever spoken to who goes through a cancer diagnosis, they do go through a time when they want to think about more about what life means. What does it mean? What's out there? What's going to happen after I die? And that's a very personal thing, but having the courage and the presence of mind to look at that question, to look at that part of your life, to look for the things in your life that are beyond yourself, is a really helpful thing as far as how your body works. They actually know that when you are, when you feel awe, which is often a spiritual feeling, that changes your body chemistry in very positive ways. And then the last one is have strong reasons for living. And that one I think is probably one of the most important, because when you feel like you have a mission, and post-cancer diagnosis, I kind of had a wishy-washy beforehand of, I want to help people. I want to be an acupuncturist and help people. Now I'm kind of on a mission. I am on a mission. I want people to understand that they have so many choices in life, and that they can choose things that make their life better. And the things that I know to share with people are how to manage their stress, how to look at life as a joyful challenge or a joyful adventure rather than a burden or something you have to kind of plug through and survive. I know that there are foods that are good for you and foods that are less good for you, and you have statistically a better chance of having the things you want in life if you eat specific foods, like things like fiber and vegetables. I know that telling people about how much movement can change their life can help their emotions and help their blood sugar, how important that is. Telling people that it's okay to have compassion on yourself. If you have more compassion on yourself, It develops empathy. You're more likely to have more empathy for other people. You're better able to serve other people, because when you're self-compassionate, you're able to see people without those needs, that kind of codependent need to fix things all over the place. You're able to help people honestly, so with authenticity. So that, having a strong reason for living, I feel like now I do in a way that I never did before, and it makes me feel so much different when I wake up in the morning. And that strong reason for living, there have been plenty of cases where you see people who are very ill or who are older and towards the end of their life, and everyone knows, the person knows, the people around them know that they won't be living that much longer. And a lot of times they live until they meet a certain goal. And when they get to the end of that goal, a lot of times it's like, then they say, okay, I've done what I wanted to do, and they let themselves die, basically. I know Johnny Cash died, the country singer. He died right after he finished an album that he had been working on. And that happens a lot of times with painters and with people. Sometimes if there's a certain age that they want to get to, sometimes when people get to be over, there's 100 or 105 or, whatever, they say, okay, there I am. I lived as long as I thought I was going to live. And that part actually is part of why I talk about what I'll do when I'm 130, because I said I used to be 118. I've upped it now. I'm going to have a few more years. 130, because when you set the expectation within your nervous system and within your body that you're going to do something, your body rallies all of its resources to help you do that. That's why if you're getting ready to jump, so you're gonna, if you need to jump over something, so you get down, you get ready to jump. Well, your body, when you do that, it's putting its energy into your legs, into your muscles. It's calculating with your eyes how far something has to be. It's putting all that stuff into play. The same thing is true when you have a reason for living. If you think, okay, I've got to make sure that in 5 years I am ready because there's a big vacation I want to take, or there's a career goal I want to reach, or I have grandchildren and I want to walk one of them down the aisle at their wedding, or whatever. Your body puts things into practice to try to make that happen. So having a strong reason for living changes your body chemistry, changes the way that your body interacts with its environment, so that you're better able to live and have an enjoyable life. Because that's another thing, having a reason to live increases your enjoyment, because suddenly life isn't just something to be just kind of endured, it's something to be, you're moving towards something. So that is the end of my little quick overview of, well, not very quick, I took quite a while with this video, but that is the end of the overview of Radical Remission. It's a wonderful book. I recommend it to anyone who's diagnosed with cancer. Oh, you know what? The person, okay, when I gave you the name of the author here, it didn't sound right. I thought I knew the name of this author. The name I gave you was the person who wrote the review that I referenced in order to find the 9 points. The author is actually Kelly A. Turner, and I thought that name didn't sound familiar to me when I read it off. So Kelly A. Turner is the author of Radical Remission, and it's a wonderful book to have if you are afraid of cancer, either from a genetic standpoint or just because the cancer is still very scary. If you have a cancer diagnosis, or if you have survived cancer, and as anyone who has been diagnosed with cancer knows, that recurrence thing is kind of out there. Every time you get checked out, it's kind of like getting another little stamp. Okay, maybe you're good for another year. Reading it and seeing lots and lots and lots of us are cancer survivors. Lots and lots and lots of us come out the other side of cancer and are either completely, no evidence of disease, nothing at all, or things are happening that we're able to manage something that we have. There's lots and lots and lots of people who are running around with stage 4 cancer who were told they were going to die, and they may still have cancer, but they've been doing things that have greatly increased their lifespan into years instead of weeks. That's not as uncommon as you would think it is. And reading a book like Radical Remission helps you see the things that you can do in your own life to help your own outcome become better. Again, nobody has any guarantees of anything. Tomorrow I could be hit by a bus, and next year I could be re-diagnosed with a recurrence of cancer or with a new cancer, because there's so many ways to get cancer now with the pollution in the air and all of the different toxins that are out there, and with family history and everything else. But I've done the things that I know can help, and I don't think that's going to happen. I'm going through my life thinking, you know what, like I said, I've got till 130, so I've got some time to make some plans and to do some things. And even if I'm wrong, the enjoyment that I get from my day-to-day life of not living with this shadow hanging over me is just, it's so much better than the alternative. So I recommend the book, and as I said before, if you have any questions, if there's anything I can help with, you can go to my link to my website down at the bottom and go over there to the contact page and we can get in touch. If you liked this video, if you found it helpful, please feel free to like it, to subscribe to my channel, share it with other people, and I will be back in probably another couple of days or next week at the latest with another episode from the Slow Path Wellness video series. Have a wonderful day. Be well.